the incidents of this weekend, throwing myself into a computer game on a temporary basis and hoping that it was temporary in the sense that I wouldn't pay to do more, and then not having as long as I deluded myself into. I thought I had most of today to bury myself as well. Leads me to sharing something that has been a problem for me my whole life. Not the kind of problem I usually share. At some point, not quite as far back as I can remember, but not too far from that, I would start drifting into these gray fogs. That I associate with a mystical existence. As though I'm breaching into or straddling two worlds. One world that never felt right to me. The world of work and human society and whatnot. And another that was enticing, but maybe not believable. A world where my mind can control what the hell is happening, and if I just slipped into it fully, if I could take that complete step, whatever that is, I would essentially be a god. You know, not in the sense, it's hard to explain in the sense that I'm creating the reality around me, but I may not consciously control it as much. Focusing properly, being properly would be important towards creating it. But the primary worries would no longer be, let me go shopping and get my food. Let me do my work so I have money to get my food. Let me go out so maybe I can meet people if that's what I want, to be able to talk to people or whatever. And the more I go for walks, the more I sort of delved into this world of that the walking and the thinking could just sort of shape things. And I used to play tricks when I was much, much older, where I'd try to shift something key in the world. Something major, but key. And shifts would happen, and I don't know if I've talked about shifts in detail before. But I couldn't get the big ones I was trying for. So I would try to do something like change the color of the grass from green to blue. And I mean really blue. Not like Kentucky bluegrass. I mean blue. And I couldn't manage anything like that. What I did manage, though, was to notice things that I wasn't trying to do would shift. Or, sometimes I was trying to do them. Which is to say, for example, there would be a building. This actually happened in Eugene, so I'm, close to 40 at this point. But I've had similar occurrences earlier. Things would happen where, like a building that I expected to be somewhere would no longer be there. And then 2 weeks later I would go and I would say, I think they must have torn it down, and it would show up. I did not have many of those experiences, any of them, in Phoenix. I had other kinds of experiences, but I don't think I had any of these. Even during the periods before I settled down better, and I was going for long walks in Phoenix and whatnot, and I was in a more depressive state. And I did realize that, wow, it was kind of cool moving to the desert, but that doesn't solve everything. Being in such a big city, if anything, made me feel more, or that particular big city, made me feel more particularly isolated than being in Eugene had. And I have to say, I definitely, coming back here, I feel much more connected with the location, with the people here, but also closer to making that bridge across the two worlds. Now, the problem is that at best, I've still always got a foot in what you and I would call the real world. I can't make that transition. I've tried, trust me. Twice now in my life, I fasted for 2 weeks. The first time I allowed myself alcohol, coffee, tea, tobacco. The second time, nothing but water. The first time, I went very far into that mystical state, and there's a reason for that. It's one of the training points. But the second time, and also the first time, I really wanted to come back and to eat. Like, the smell of food drove me fucking crazy for the last couple days of my fast. I was opening up jars of pickles and sniffing them. I was sniffing everybody's food. Well, I was sniffing my wife at that time's food regularly. It was very magical. The second time, I felt like I could go on forever and just starve myself to death. Who knows? And maybe that's the answer. Maybe that's where the choice lies, to cross those worlds. I don't know enough, though, to make that decision. That could just be a death like any other death, and then it's just either accelerating a process, Hey, I'm impatient, but unless I know, or, well, in either case, it would be accelerating a process. It's whether it's towards an end that I embrace, or one that, that's just the end of the pain and the suffering. I can be in pain and suffering. I'm used to that. To some extent, I revel in it. You learn to like what you have, right? To some extent, Some people are like, oh, look at all my beautiful cars and everything. I'm like, look at how much I suffer. This is what I'm proud of. I'm proud of being miserable. I'm proud of the hurt that I've lived through. We all have what we have. And I don't know, So, I say two worlds in a way. Maybe there's three, maybe there's four, maybe there's many. One is that rational world, the world where I have to go shopping, and I'm always infected, right? I don't drive. Why? Well, because I'm a lousy driver, but there's other reasons. There's all kinds of things that are just going to impact me across the board, which I say are not of this world, and why I'm not of this world, not of the rational world. I don't fit into it. I don't belong in it. I don't belong in the world that human society has created. I don't know, I don't think I particularly belong out hunting in the woods either, right? My eyesight alone says I should not survive in this world, right? I'm functionally incapable of surviving without that human world as it stands. Okay, take that. So, I'm not advocating some sort of existence that's sort of natural, because obviously that will just kill me. But I'm also clearly do not belong in the world of humanity, the world that we kind of share and our language indicates that we share. Another world is the world where I can drown myself in video games or reading books or whatever it is that I can blot out the reality, the shared world, whatever. And there's something beautiful about that. There definitely is, especially books. The video games, they feel wrong. I'm not taking care of myself. I'm sitting in one place. I can't go for walks, which I think is important in terms of and when I do, I'm just rushing back to get to my game, to get my fix. They're just a drug, and I recognize that, and I recognize that they absolutely do not work for me. It's the same kind of experience that I think I would get off of shooting up heroin, right? Where when I come to, I feel horrible. I don't necessarily feel that great while I'm in it, but there's an initial hit. There's no question. There's an initial huge hit of dopamine, starting a game, getting back into it, whatever. But that I know is unreal. And what feels closer is that straddling of the worlds, where I'm going on long walks, I'm in that gray haze, maybe I'm reading most of the time, maybe I'm not following the routines that allow, in fact, I'm almost divorced from real routines, and by doing that, by unhinging myself from that real world, by removing what staples me to that world that allows me to be able to hold a job, to be able to get food when I need it, all that stuff. And all that stuff is new, buckling into that. New to me meaning 15 years. Call it since I moved to Phoenix. Or since I kind of developed certain routines that allowed me to stay in. But none of it feels right. And I've grown, and in my time in Phoenix, I grew more and more disconnected from that mystical side of me that had always been there. I mean, even early on in Phoenix, I would go for walks and I would feel it come upon me. I would feel the visions as I'm walking. That was fading greatly, and being with someone damages it as well. With anyone? I'm not sure. Could I play? Could I draw from
that mystical world and share it with someone. And I've tried, and it feels like I'm just fucking playing the same way that, like, you know, guys in leather masks being this kind of dom type looks like play to me. It doesn't look real. It isn't that natural compulsion to be what you are. It's more, it's more like being in the SCA, or being in a play or whatever. It's not living it anymore. Now, maybe I see it differently. Maybe when the life that they're living within it, it works perfectly fine for them. But for me, all these things feel like play. One of the key elements of that other world may just be isolation, but it may be isolation trying to draw and create that thing with which I can commune. Create God, if you would. So now that's putting me above a God. We always have to do that. We always have to do that. We have to keep it grounded that this is my creation. This has to be mine. This whole world is mine. I must be able to control it. That's the mystical side. The other side is I'm this fucking pointless peon who is ruled by it. They shut my heat off if I don't pay the bill. I have to go to their institutions to get my food. So the one side becomes a bodiless existence, a pure being, and the other side becomes a slave to the existence of this world. And I know what you're saying at this point. You're saying that breach is obvious, that link is obviously, in order to cross that bridge, you do have to die. Maybe. But it has to be done right if that's the case. It has to be done as an act of pure will, not as a physical thing that afflicts this body. It has to be a crossing over and forcing my spirit out of myself. That's maybe at the heart of why suicide is impossible for me, is because the only way I should be able to do it is as that pure act of love and will. Love and will are the same. I've discussed that before. And love of self. Love of, which, if you know me, you'd think, well, you don't love yourself at all. That's why you're a narcissist, of course. Yeah. Yeah. And learning to fully love that side of me might be the requirement for the transition. But here's the problem. I exist in this real world, so I must keep some level of foot in it. That level of foot could be the level of foot that puts me in an insane asylum, so that they feed and keep me alive. That level of foot could be enough to keep my job, but go towards my mystical drive. So what it has been for the past 15 years, not quite, is more and more that level of foot is ruling my life, is dominating it, and I am neglecting the side which has always previously been more important to me. Comfort. There is no comfort in the world I seek. It is roiling pain and pleasure, and that's it. There's nothing else. There's just intensity. I don't know if any of this makes a damn bit of sense to anyone. I don't have anyone left nearby that I can pontificate to. The camera, you're my replacement. And even people who are eminently swayable by me to some extent, like my ex-wife, well, my last wife especially, but everyone I've been with, certain invariants that I need in my life, they end up following. And that makes sense, otherwise we couldn't exist together. Things like walking to get the groceries with my recently passed wife. That wasn't her choice. She thought we could get them delivered, or we could get a cab, or something like that. But she went along with it, right? Yet, the bridge to what I'm saying, and because I haven't fully gone there, and if I fully ever go there, I don't think I can come back, is not persuasive. I think anyone who can still preach, anyone who can come and say, I know the truth, and preach it, is a pure fucking charlatan. Because what they've done is they've turned their back on the truth. And they're leading a life that allows them to keep that foot here and to make that foot good. And especially the ones who do well within this world. Imagine the megachurch people and whatnot. Oh, man. Now, we could get into bejesus here. When I was young, I always saw him as a mystic who maybe was following that path. But I don't think that's possible. I don't think it's possible to get followers that way. And recently, and of course, maybe it depends on your level of power or whatever, but a level of will. But I won't admit that anything is greater than I am, so there you have it. It's better to roll in my own private hell than to serve anywhere else. But that all kind of fell apart. Any kind of thought that this was another mystic fell apart because, and I'll go into this a little bit more, but I've seen some very, very persuasive arguments for why Jesus never even existed as a human, that he's just an angel who lived in the heavens, and that whole struggle was in the heavens, and then it was translated, and he was reified by a cult of Jews, and probably by a charlatan. But the other, and that brings up Muhammad, for whom there's interesting evidence, i.e., there's no real evidence of him, but there's evidence of him being covered up, but that's similar to some of the Jesus stuff. There's so much evidence of cover-up, but there's more real, there's more real evidence, supposedly, for Jesus, but it falls apart in many ways. Many ways. It all resonates too much with earlier myths. And of course, if you're Christian, you're going to say, well, of course it resonates. Those are prophecies or whatever. And some of them are, some of them are not. Some of them are just, absconded with. So, where am I? Let's leave this digression. See, I digress even when I'm talking about things that don't make sense. Playing that video game threw me into enough of a disoriented state. And you see why people do drugs to get their religious experiences or whatnot. To be able to state the problem that has been plaguing me for my life. But I have withdrawn from the problem for at least 10 years, longer than that. And over time, it was at its strongest when I was perhaps in my teens, or maybe younger. Maybe back in the era where I cannot remember from, where the world of my imagery was much stronger. Maybe that's what I'm looking to go back to. Not a remembered childhood, but where I was more heavily into a world that you would all deem insane, and that I deem as, if I had the strength, I would force my way in. But I don't have that strength yet. But maybe this is the inflection point, the time to move there, to head back. They always say you move into a second childhood. Maybe those greenish yellow faces are calling to me. All right, up you go.